Turn the lights on for the Tyler Bright and Early podcast, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football centered. We're taking a look at week 6 this week, but before we do that, let's take a recap of what happened this past weekend in week 5. So obviously the big upset on Friday night between Virginia and Florida State. Virginia winning in double OT against the Seminoles, getting the job done. And really a defining moment, I think, for Tony Elliott. You know, a lot of people said after him being a successful offensive coordinator under Dabo Swinney and Clemson, is he going to take the next steps as a head coach? Is he going to be successful? They didn't really have that much success so far since he's been the head coach, but that's a defining win for your program. That's a defining win, able to get the job done. And obviously, against a team like Florida State that had an early upset win over Alabama early on in the season, Florida State is still going to be a contender, I feel like, and I'll talk about them a little bit more later. But a defining win for Virginia. And I don't think anyone was really expecting it, but just the definition of a trap game for Virginia coming out with the win, you know, and then the field storming was just electric. All the fans right on top of the field and just immediately, as soon as it was intercepted in the end zone, just the masses stalking all over Scott Stadium. Everyone loves a good field rush. I'm pretty sure they got fined though. And I'm pretty sure that's a rule for every team in the ACC and every team in college football, but I am for field storming. You know, yeah, they could say that players might get hurt, yada yada yada. There's a lot of liabilities that you can get hurt of at a sporting game. I learned all about it in a sport law class. So there's a lot of potential dangers that you face, or people that people are at risk of. You know, I'm not going to get into that, but anyway, but yeah. So, yeah, you had that game. You also had the Penn State-Oregon game, the whiteout game, in which Oregon got the job done and proved why they're the second best team in the country, according to the AP poll, just right behind Ohio State. I think that's pretty evident, though. They have deserved to be a top 3 team so far this season. And then Penn State, same old, man. Same old. You know, you're a great team, but once you face some better competition, you just don't show up. And, you know, it's tough because Oregon was kind of going away with it early, and then Penn State kind of brought it back. And the Penn State defense looks great. Jim Knowles looks great. But Drew Aller is Drew Aller. He just can't get the job done. He just can't get the job done when it comes to superior teams. You know, he may be a good quarterback at the next level. He may be a high draft pick. I doubt it. But he might be a decent draft pick. And I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem like it's working out. And I don't know. It's just Drew Aller's just not. It showed it. He did have an amazing throw in that game, like one of the best throws he's probably ever had in his entire career. But how does Bo Pribula feel? You know, do you wish he had Bo Pribula? Would he have done better in this game? Probably not. Let's be real here, because like I like Bo Pribula, but I don't know if he would have done much better than what Drew Aller did. I just think Oregon's a great team. And Ohio State, Oregon, they're going to be the top 2, but you can't sleep on Indiana too. Indiana's right there. But yeah, man, but yeah, that's all I can really say. Oregon, top 2 team in the country. And then you also had the great Georgia-Alabama game. Alabama getting the job done, beats Kirby Smart. And that kind of goes into my next kind of takeaway is the SEC is wide open. The SEC is wide open. It could be Texas, it could be Georgia, it could be Ole Miss, it could be Bama, it could be Vandy. You know, I feel like after Ole Miss beat LSU, I just feel like they have too many problems. They cannot run the football, and they don't even try to run the football. They don't even try. They had around like 60 yards rushing. Like, what are we doing? And, you know, Brian Kelly, he's firing all these coordinators. He got rid of Matt House. Might get rid of Joe Sloan this year. At what point do you kind of look at yourself in the mirror and say, you know, maybe it's my problem. Maybe I'm the issue. Maybe I'm the problem. I'm not saying that's exactly what the problem was for Brian Kelly. Also, nice throw up by Whit Weeks, you know, Landry Kiffin's boyfriend, also star linebacker for the LSU Tigers, you know, just nice and high definition. Just seeing that on TV. And of course, Lane Kiffin had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, I think Lane Kiffin's a top 10 coach in college football. And there's a really good shot that this team's going to win the SEC. I think Ole Miss has a real clear shot to make the college football playoff, but I'll talk about that more next week when we do our quarterly predictions for the college football playoff. That is going to be next week, so make sure to tune in for that. And the way that you can tune in for that is to follow us on all of our social media platforms. You can follow us on Instagram and X and TikTok And then you can also listen and subscribe to full episodes on Spotify and YouTube. So stay up to date on all things Tyler bright and early. Come on. I know you want to tune in. We got some great content here, but yeah. So, and then also staying in the SEC, Sam Pittman out as the head coach of the Hogs. And, Sam Pittman was a kind of hire that was a little bit controversial at the time. He was a great assistant, was a great recruiter while he was an offensive line coach at Georgia. And he's an Arkansas guy. He coached at Arkansas under Brett Bielema as an offensive line coach. And he felt like that was the identity that this Arkansas Razorback fan base needed. An offensive line coach, Arkansas boy, loves Arkansas. It's his dream job, but it just didn't work out. And, they had some pretty good years, when he had Kendall Briles as his offensive coordinator, kind of surprised everyone. And I think won like 9 games. It just didn't really work out. And I just feel like it was time for a change. And I feel like a lot of people at the beginning of the season thought this change was going to happen. But now here it is. And now they're making the change. But going with Bobby Petrino is a choice. Me being a U of L grad, I know a lot about Bobby Petrino. And just wherever Bobby Petrino becomes a head coach, he leaves that program in a little bit of a dumpster fire. Let's just say that. They only won 2 games his last year once Lamar Jackson left. And then, of course, the reason why he had to leave Arkansas was because of the allegations that he had, riding the motorcycle. We're not getting into that, but, it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to make fun of that. But I will say this, Bobby Petrino, his track record as a head coach when he starts and is kind of in those middle years, he's not too bad. But, here he is coming as the interim head coach, and he's making changes early, firing some defensive coaches, firing the defensive coordinator, firing some other defensive assistants. He's trying to get back to the basics and make sure that they run the basics right. I don't know what. I have a feeling they're probably going to upset someone, but just I can't imagine. And he's trying to go for the full-time job is the amazing part about it. But yeah, he's not going to get it. But who do they look at? Who do they go for? I think you have to go with Rhett Lashley over at SMU. He's, he played at Arkansas. He's from Springdale. Do you go after him? I think you should. Now, if you're Rhett Lashley, do you want that program? I think SMU might even have more money to pull out, being a private school down in Dallas, having all those donors and boosters. And Arkansas's got their boosters too. Don't get me wrong. They got Jerry Jones. They got the Jerry Jones crew up there. But it's going to be tough. Like Rhett Lashley, Alex Golish. Does Alex Golish go for that job? Because he's losing a lot of players at USF. Alex Golish is going to get a job this year. He is going to get a job, or I should say, Alex Golish is going to get a job after this season, because if you stay at USF, you might miss your window. Just look at Jeff Traylor. Jeff Traylor is a perfect example of that. Gary Darnell at Western Michigan, when he didn't take jobs at UNC or Rutgers in the early 2000s, then kind of sunk his ship at Western Michigan. Matt Campbell, I think even for a little bit, but maybe Matt Campbell's he's a little bit of a different boat because he's not Group of 5. But there's plenty of other coaches that you can look at where they've had that situation where maybe they thought they were going to take it to the next level, but then they stayed at their current job and then they just kind of were stuck there and then got fired. So it happens all the time. But is Arkansas a winning job in the SEC? I don't think so. I really don't. At least not in football. And especially since you have Calipari, and they're a really good baseball school. Like, Arkansas cares a lot about their baseball program. I feel like you're in the SEC just to take losses. Unfortunately, yeah, someone's got to do it. And right now it looks like it's going to be Arkansas, because Vanderbilt's got some good coaches in there, and they're trying to build it around. Are they going to be dominant? Probably not. But Arkansas's not going to be at the top of the chain anytime soon. So, hate to say it, but someone's got to lose. Mississippi State's kind of doing better than expectations as well. I don't know. It's going to be tough. But I'm interested to see who they go for Arkansas. I heard someone say Gus Malzahn, but Gus Malzahn's not taking a head coach. There's a reason why he left UCF to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State. So, but that's enough on Arkansas. So now, let's look at the Week 6 games. Let's see what we got going here. Some big games coming up this week. So here, coming up in Week 6, you got a big one on ABC at noon. You got Kentucky and at Georgia. So Georgia coming off the big loss. I think they're going to dominate against the Kentucky Wildcats. With Mark Stoops, though, it is kind of interesting because a lot of people say, is Mark Stoops going to get fired after this year? There's no way Mark Stoops is leaving Lexington. I know. I feel like his chance was to go to Texas A&M. And also, they can't figure out their quarterback situation. I think they started with Zach Calzada, but they're probably playing musical chairs at the quarterback position for all I know. Kentucky is a basketball school, whether you like it or not. And especially since the amount of money, I think his contract, he's there up until 2030. He's not leaving anytime soon. There's way too much money. And then if you fire Mark Stoops, who are you going to get that's going to be automatically better? People say, oh, they can go after John Summerall over at Tulane. They're not going over there. They're not. He's not going over there, I should say. He's probably going to get a better job, or he's just going to go somewhere else. I just don't see it. Sorry about the mic there. Yeah, I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening in Georgia, especially after losing to Alabama. This is just going to be one of those get-back games where you're just going to dominate. Kirby Smart's going to be all tenacity, all gas, no foot on the brakes, kind of that type of game. And, that's a pretty ironic analogy that I just made right there. I'll leave that to you to pick up the clues. Anyway, so, not as many great games necessarily, one could say, compared to what we got last week. But there's still some great games because you got Vanderbilt at Alabama. That's College game day. Vanderbilt taking on the Alabama Crimson Tide, and the winner of that game has a really good shot to make the SEC championship game. And I'm dead serious when I mean that, just based on like how the schedule is. That's 3:30 on ABC. Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia is probably the best quarterback that they ever had in the program's history. Although Jay Cutler might have a word, but I feel like Pavia is definitely having way more success at the program than I feel like Jay Cutler is. I don't have the stats up right in front of me, but Pavia, and also Pavia's just been, he's played in college football forever, so I hope he'd be good, be this good at this point, But you also got some other games. You got Texas Tech going on the road to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium to take on the Gators, and if Florida gets blown out in this game, I think Billy Napier's just going to get fired, and it's kind of perfect timing since you're past the 4-game mark. Once you play more than 4 games, your players don't redshirt, and they might just quit on the team anyway if you're getting blown out and your coach gets fired. But yeah, I just don't expect things to change anytime soon at Florida, especially since Billy Napier's still adamant on he needs to be the play caller. TJ Lagway struggling. It just seems like a whole wreck down there in Gainesville. But you also got Boise State taking on Notre Dame. Not many people have been talking about Boise State after they lost to USF. And Notre Dame, a lot of people still really high on the Fighting Irish. And I think Notre Dame's going to cruise through the rest of their schedule. Marcus Freeman's a great coach, and CJ Carr as a quarterback has done really well. He's young and he's developing. He's becoming better at the quarterback position. But yeah, Notre Dame by a lot. Let's see some other games that we got coming up on here. You got Texas Tech at Houston. That can be a really key matchup, especially in the Big 12. Joey McGuire has done a really good job at that Texas Tech program. I feel like they've kind of found out their quarterback position on who they're going to go with. They have some really good options there. And then Houston looks pretty good too. I wasn't super high on Houston, but Houston has proven me wrong. I've been pretty wrong on the Big 12 so far this year. I thought Kansas State was going to be good, and then they were not so good. And yeah. So, and then shout out Cincinnati. I didn't talk about that. Shout out Cincinnati getting the win over Kansas last week. And there was a great interview of Sorsby, their quarterback, talking with the TNT crew, basically saying none of y'all thought, I think it was Victor Cruz, the salsa guy. Victor Cruz was basically saying, I got to be honest with you, I don't think anyone expected to pick Cincinnati to win. And he's like, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a Cal. And then Sorsby clapped back and said, I got to be honest with you, I'm a Cowboys fan, so I don't really like you. So that was crazy. That was crazy, but okay, let's get back on the games. You got Ohio State taking on Minnesota. Ohio State's gonna blow them out. I'd like PJ Fleck, but Ohio State is number one for a reason. They're just a dominant team in the Big Ten. Julian Sayin, is he the right guy? I haven't seen, nothing's been super flashy, but that's a lot of the quarterbacks that you can say so far here in 2025. I think he's going to find some speed eventually, but how's Ohio State going to look against some of their bigger games? That's what we're going to have to see down the stretch. Miami taking on Florida State, 7:30 on ABC. That's going to be a great game. And I think Florida State could, yes, they lost to Virginia, but you got to give Virginia a little bit more credit. Virginia's a really great team. I just think a lot of people thought it's a weird thing because either people either jump to conclusions where like, oh, Virginia's not that good. Florida State just sucks. Well, obviously they didn't. Obviously they don't suck because they beat Alabama. Florida State's good. It was just Virginia. Virginia is a little bit better than people expected. But Miami looks pretty good too. I think that's a really good toss-up game. It is in Tallahassee, but I'm going to go with Miami. I think Miami is the better team overall, but I think it's going to be a good game. And I think we're going to see a pretty good offensive showcase between these two teams. But now to the game that I really want to talk about. Been talking a lot about the Virginia Cavaliers, but who do they take on? They take on the Louisville Cardinals coming into the Derby City to take them on this Saturday. And that's going to be a game that I'm definitely excited to watch. Louisville had a little bit of a rough patch against Pittsburgh in their first real test, their first road game, their first ACC opponent, and they started off rocky. It was looking really bad. But then in the second half, they came back, a great comeback win. Miller Moss looks great. And then, the running back group looks really well with Isaac. It doesn't matter if it's Isaac Brown or Kewan Brown. Isaac Brown has been a little bit quiet. He's not exactly at 100%, but he still looked pretty good. Also, talk about Colin Lacey, might be one of the best return specialists in the country, and I'm dead serious. He is electric. Colin Lacey is electric. He looks really good. Chris Bell's a great receiver as well, and Isaac Brown, 33 attempts, 268 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kewan Brown, 110 yards and 3 touchdowns as well. I believe Kewan Brown, the problem is they've had a lot of injuries as well too. And I'm not exactly confident in the defense. Virginia has a really good running game, but I feel really good because I feel like a lot of people are underestimating Louisville based on their schedule. And, and Pitt was a pretty good test. They were a gritty team. And then Blue Hicks looked really good against Louisville. He kind of cooked that Louisville secondary, and he was a former Colonel as well. So, also, I didn't understand what Pitt was doing with Eli Holston, kind of pulling him out and then putting Gonzalez in. Pat Narduzzi, I don't know what you're doing, but I don't know. That's why you're a defensive guru. But back to this game, the Cardinals. I think they're going to get the win. I think the Cards are going to get the win over Virginia. I think it's going to be a little bit of a letdown game for Virginia after the big all-time upset win over Florida State. And they have a track record of upsetting Florida State. Beat Danny Kanell and those Knowles back in the 90s. But yeah, I think Louisville's an overall more consistent, well-rounded team, and it's going to be at home. So I think that's an advantage for the Cardinals. I think a lot of people aren't talking about the Cardinals, and although I will say Louisville tends to win a game that they're not supposed to and lose a game that they're not supposed to. So we haven't seen that game yet. But we'll see. We'll see when that train leaves the station. But yeah, that's pretty much a lot of what I was talking about today. A little bit of a short episode here today, but there's a lot of things that are interesting about week 6. Not as great as week 5. But nonetheless, it's still college football. Make sure to tune in next week for our quarterly college football playoff predictions. I got some heavy hitters in there, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's going to do it for today's episode of the Tyler Bright and Early Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Bright, PBJ Productions' official flagship podcast for all things college football centered.